I wanted to make a video because there's a concept going around on the internet that I've been seeing over the last few months, and it's called cultural Marxism. And I must say that I look askance at it at first because I thought it was something along the lines of cultural Bolshevism that I read about when I was studying Nazi Germany. This was a more or less a movement in the 1920s and 30s, if I'm not mistaken, where the Nazis wanted to completely eliminate all modern art because they thought it was linked to Bolshevism. So they had this movement called cultural Bolshevism, which said any degenerate art, the degenerate art was basically any modern art that the Nazis didn't like, uh, pretty much was banned from ever being shown. Any dresses or clothing that would hint at any sort of Bolshevistic values would be eliminated, right? So I thought it was along those lines, so I didn't really take it too seriously. I thought, okay, this is just the whole Nazi thing coming up all over again. But then I started looking at other, I guess I suppose you can say, thinkers or public intellectuals saying it. And then I saw newscasters saying it. I saw interviewers saying it, and I thought, that is very interesting. And I did a quick Wikipedia search of cultural Marxism, I think about a week ago. And then I just saw, wait a minute, this is absurd. You're linking Marxism to political correctness and identity politics. I just fell off my chair. I just thought this is insane. That is totally, totally, totally wrong. And I thought of just making a video. Maybe this is just my contribution. I'm just a lowly man that you don't know. I'm not an expert on Marx. I haven't read all his work. I've read enough to know where he's coming from. But this is just my understanding, and you can take it for what it is, or you can ignore me. That's totally fine. Cultural Marxism is a total oxymoron. It's a total oxymoron. It doesn't make sense when you understand his philosophy. Now, if you want to understand Marx, you got to read two thinkers and you got to read them in great detail. Okay. You got to read Hegel and then you got to read Ludwig Feuerbach. Feuerbach more than Hegel. Okay. Now, Hegel is the grand philosopher. He pretty much set the template for all the Hegelians that came after him. So you had the old Hegelians, that's more the religious sort of sect of Hegelians, theologians that took his ideas. But the young Hegelians was Marx and Feuerbach. They were the more radical, liberal type, the more materialist type of philosophers. And Feuerbach more or less took Hegel's view and made it secular. And Marx, when he was young, used Feuerbach's ideas to form his philosophy, just the rudiments of it. Like the theory of alienation came straight from Feuerbach, the essence of Christianity, right? Marx materialized that and made it more economic. So if you want to read Marx carefully and properly, you have to look at those two thinkers, right? But essentially, if you want to understand Marx, this is a basic understanding of Marx. Marx took Hegel's idea of the spirit, of the rational spirit, and he materialized it. That's essentially what he did, right? So Hegel's dialect is now a materialist. So it's dialectical materialism. So what drives history isn't spirit like it is in Hegel. What drives history is the material conditions in Marx. And the material conditions are economic in nature, right? They're economic. So with Marx, you famously had the different phases of the material conditions of what moves history. So you had slavery, then you had feudalism, then you had capitalism, then you had socialism, and then you had communism, right? Essentially, that was where you would land in his theory. And Marx said that his theory is scientific. It's deterministic. This is something that you have to go through this process in order to reach the utopian society that Marx envisioned. And so with Marx, he firmly laid the foundation of his philosophy is economic. Like, it cannot work outside of an economic context. And there have been many thinkers who thought that they could take Marx's ideas out of that economic context, and they soon found that no, they have a different system altogether. They thought that they're Marxists, but they really weren't. And I think that when one reads Marx carefully, they will see that. They will see that very much. I'm not going to explain all his philosophy because that's a pretty long video to make. But it is to say that Marxism is an economist. He's a philosopher, yes, but he's an economist, and he has to be an economist because his whole philosophy is rooted in materialism, in this material conditions of history. And he believes that economics is what drives history. So when you're looking at Marx, you have to root him there. Once you get him out of that and you say, no, it's cultural, then it doesn't work at all. And so when you're linking Marxism to identity politics and political correctness, I think that's a huge mistake. Huge mistake. It doesn't work. I think that your issue is not with Marx, but it's with the postmodernists. You see, postmodernism and Marxism, two completely different systems. Marx was a structuralist. Marx was also a rationalist. He was sort of kind of an Enlightenment thinker, right? Along with Sark as well. Sark and Marx were similar in that aspect where they believed in reason and they believed in individuality. These are Enlightenment principles. Whereas the postmodernists completely inverted the Enlightenment sort of foundation or structure, if you will. And they made everything about the collective. They made everything about subjectivity. They didn't like cooperation in certain aspects. They wanted conflict amongst groups. So all of these things of political correctness, identity politics, really just came from the postmodernists when you read them carefully. Foucault, for example, his theories on power, is very much in line with what we see with many of the left-wing radical sort of figures that we see. They're echoing a lot of his sentiments. And I think you ought to redirect your energy to the postmodernists and leave Marx alone because he has nothing to do with identity politics and political correctness. But I make this video because I think it's important for us to read these thinkers carefully. And I'm very concerned that many people don't read anymore. They don't read anymore. And I can tell they don't read. They're watching videos and they're watching a video of a so-called philosopher, so-called thinker, whom they are trusting because they think, well, he must be smarter than me. No, if you want to be a thinker, you want to be a critical thinker, you have to read for yourself and you have to sit down and think about it. You can't let people think for you. And the fear that I have is that people are not thinking for themselves. Critical thinking is down, and you're having all these political wrangles and rankers that we sing, and none of them know what they're talking about. And it's causing all these problems in our society when all we have to do is just sit down and really critically think. So I I hope this video was helpful to anybody who wants to look deeper into this. Please do. I would recommend reading Marx very carefully. The Communist Manifesto is decent. It's not really where you go if you want to understand Marx. I think you would have to understand him when Das Kapital Volume 1 is very good. But really, I would say the German ideology, a contribution to the critique of political economy is very good as well when he's attacking uh, Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Uh, his theses on Feuerbach are decent because that tells you kind of where he's going. He was very young when he wrote that. I would recommend reading Feuerbach, The Essence of Christianity, Hegel, obviously, The Phenomenology of Spirit. That's a hard book, but his philosophy of history, the lectures on that are pretty good. the science of logic, just to understand his method of thinking. Like, you gotta sit down and read those men in order for you to understand Marx, and then not go down this road where you're just attributing things that Marx never said. So, I hope that was helpful.